And we're live. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, good. Thanks
Sweet.
for having me
Yeah,
on.
man. We were kind of starting to talk about this a little bit, but we I saw that you built out the city-based dashboard, kind of in response to Balaji's tweets and stuff on it. And we're talking about how we're both big fans of him, and he puts out so many interesting ideas, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, he definitely it's pretty heavy information, and it's definitely my favorite Twitter account.
Yeah, I think by far, like I literally like I look forward to like reading his tweets every day, and like, um, it's weird. It's weird. Like some days if I don't see them, I'm like, what's going on? He hasn't tweeted yet. Like, what's happening? I need I need my I need my daily dose. but um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so the city based dashboard thing was interesting because basically his thing was like, newspapers are geared around sort of cherry picking the things that will, get a response from people, right? So if it bleeds it leads kind of thing. And so like the kind of the exact inverse of that would be a dashboard that tracks trends and things over time, which instead of orienting us all towards like what is this one thing that can make us all angry or evoke a reaction in us, what's the signal behind, it's kind of seeing the signal for the noise, and like and then as you think about putting together a dashboard, like what are the metrics we can track, what are the things. And then if you had that in like a local newspaper, and you just got everybody focused on these things and trying to improve them or whatever. And then so you went out and actually built kind of a proof of concept, right?
Yeah. I think and that's really the idea is that hey, there's I think that obviously we can all see what's happened to newspapers, and there's just not a ton that there's not a lot of meat there anymore, especially
Yeah.
like the more local newspapers. And that's partly from the model that they have, but also from the just sort of the watering down of information, and everything becomes sort of a political take.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I when I started my project, then um, I felt like, hey, there's all this interesting data, and was kind of putting it together in sort of a story format. And then when I saw Balaji's tweet, then about, hey, what if what if local news became more community dashboard oriented?
Hmm.
Then it was like we were getting ready to actually go print a real newspaper, which was I've never done that before.
Uh,
Um, and it was like our first one, and I was like, oh, hey, I'm gonna I'm gonna piggyback on that idea and put it all into one page and call it a community dashboard, just like he said. Um, and just take all those data points and put them in one spot. And it's also interesting from a newspaper point of view is that when you put it all into one page, when you put it into print, it's something that you can spend a little bit more time with.
hmm. Hmm.
And so I think it is kind of it actually ends up being really interesting from putting it in print, and not just a digital dashboard.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, we're so used to everything being digital, like in our generation, stuff like that. Like the idea of something print based is a little outside of the box, but it probably forces you to isolate the most important stuff, and so you can kind of fit it on a page. Um, yeah, I live in a town. I'm about a half hour, 40 minutes north of Austin, a town called Georgetown, and it's grown a lot, but it's smallish, and so I had the idea of like I was like, oh, I was thinking about like putting something together and trying to think through what metrics would you want to track, how would you get the data. I was thinking about it as like a web based dashboard, um, but yeah, so like what metrics were you able to get? What are some of the things that you're maybe working on, thinking about what are some, if somebody else wanted to put something together. Like I was sitting there going, how would I even get this data? Like, do I got to go to a city council meeting? Like what do I have to do? You know?
Yeah, so what I did was, and we kind of mentioned earlier, I had done a local news network startup years and years ago, back in like 2010 or 11.
Yeah. Could you share a
I
little bit
still,
about that?
yeah,
That's wild. I don't really hear about that many,
yeah.
you know.
So I had my first startup was a soft drink company, randomly,
Dude, you're
and
all over the
I
map. I love it, man.
yeah, it's all over the place. I started that when I was like 20, I don't remember, 25 or something.
Yeah.
Um, and in that one, it went really well, and then it didn't, and so I was out of money, and moved back home to Kansas, and I was like, hey, I think that there's something here as far as creating local news, like a local news network
Yeah.
into different communities. And I did that for about 8 months, and then got approached by a telecommunications company, like a regional one. They acquired the company from me, and I went and worked there. And I've been working on my software startup for about almost 4 years now, and but I kept some of my Gmail was connected to all of this. I used to get from the police department in a couple counties and the sheriff's
You were
department in a couple
signed up to a
counties.
bunch of alerts and things like that.
Yeah, and they had some like data stuff where they would just send out these PDFs, and so I'd had them in my Gmail for a really long time, and I don't really use that Gmail very much. And
Uh-huh.
one day I was just kind of this summer I was just kind of goofing around, and looked in there, and I'm like, oh, interesting, and I just kind of thought about what I might be able to do with some of the data, and so I put it into, it was weird because it's in a PDF. Like they don't
Yeah.
have, it's not like they're sending out their crime statistics in a CSV or anything that you could actually use. It's
Right.
just a PDF.
Right.
And I just kind of figured out how to yank that, how to convert that from a PDF into a CSV format, and then put it into a pandas data frame, and was able to kind of yank it out and put it into a meaningful format, and thought, this could be really interesting,
So did you like write
providing.
some code to kind of scrape it? To scrape it?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So it scrapes it. Now it's all automated, but like they still don't have like an Excel sheet or a CSV. It's just PDFs.
And you
Um,
just have code
and
that
so
on
that
a
was,
regular basis just scrapes it and okay, nice.
uh, yeah, it just sends an email, and now I've got it set up to where it's all synced up, and it just scrapes it and then puts it into basically converts it and puts it into a database. And then
Nice.
we enable these charts. Um, but the to get back to your original question, the data that we kind of found was, the crime stuff's always is obviously interesting. It's something that, especially I think right now, where there's been an increase in crime in certain locations.
Yeah.
Um, it Whenever there's like movement and things change, then there's an interest in some of these things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of rumor about that, like, oh, crime, it's really high. Okay, it looks like it probably is in some places, but where do we actually have, where's that data coming from, or where is that the logic there? And in some places it probably hasn't changed all that much, but it's just sort of like the rumor, and so that's where I kind of felt like, hey, this would be an interesting one. Let's see, because we have the data. They release all of this, like how
Yeah.
many incidents they, where they went, what they worked on.
Yeah.
So we have that, and that one was definitely the most um, well received, because they just didn't have that anywhere.
Yeah.
But then there's um, you know how many road construction projects they have going on. Is there more work on roads happening? Um, um, like some of the other interesting things that we found, like gas prices right now in the actual city. Like, see where is it? Is it, how much is it up here versus the next county over? Being
Hmm.
able to kind of compare it and see if it's the same impact there.
Yeah.
Um, how many houses are being sold? That's another thing that
Right.
that is clearly everything that's gone on with in the real estate market.
Yeah.
Um, Now we can kind of say, oh, here's how many are selling this week. Um, I'm trying to think of some of the other things that we have. Oh, employment. Naturally, that's one of the biggest things right now is
Hmm.
how many people are actually looking for a job.
Yeah.
How many are thinking of changing jobs, and doing that not just at the national level because that's where we see a lot of data, but actually being able to do it, um, at a smaller, more local level.
Yeah, everything's so much more kind of meaningful and actionable at like a local level. Um,
Yep.
I was trying to think through with the job stuff. Like, I think I looked at some of your charts, and I think you had, like you said, people looking for jobs and then open vacancies and stuff. And I work with like recruiting for software developers and stuff, and so I was thinking about like, how do you match up? Would there be a way to figure out, out of the people that are looking and the jobs that are open, are there some metrics you could put together around how, how to match them up, and how
Oh
to,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
and that would be, that's where it could really get interesting. Yeah, you dive in and try to find out, okay, well, what kind of jobs, like who's
exactly.
looking for jobs,
Yeah, yeah,
and who isn't,
yeah.
and seeing how that changes over time.
My wife was telling me yesterday that we actually homeschool, and our kids are in a co-op. It's like a weekly, the kids get together and have classes and stuff. And their company's reaching out to the co-op, to this homeschool co-op with like 50 families, trying to hire the high school kids for various jobs because it's like so hard to find people, I guess, these days, with everything
Interesting.
that's, yeah, I was like, what? That's crazy. Um,
That is.
with everything that's going on with like the unemployment stuff and um, things like that. So what do you like, if you could get any metrics, if you could, without thinking about the practicalities of getting the data, like if you could pull any metrics, what do you think would give you the most meaningful information about like the overall health of a community, whether it's like economic, what like families, anything, if you could have anything at all. I was trying to think through like
Ooh,
how to
I
figure that
know.
out.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I think my and part of the reason I'm interested in this is I'm very interested in, um, localism, and so I think one thing that would be really interesting is if you could get how much money is, like, where the movement of money in a community, to be able
Okay.
to see how much people are spending at Walmart or big national chains
Hmm.
versus, the local businesses versus e-commerce.
Hmm.
Um, one thing just kind of noticing and living in a small town, you can kind of see, okay, how much money people are spending, like with Amazon, and I think Amazon does a great job of a lot of things, but if you're in one of these communities, you know a lot of that money that goes to Amazon is never coming back to that community again.
Right.
So
Right.
you're
Right.
you're
Right.
sort of exporting dollars.
Right. You have like an
Uh,
import export imbalance kind of a thing.
yeah, totally, and I mean, it's not likely to come back to some of these small towns. You
Yeah.
know, um, and just the ramifications of being able to see, like, okay, if a town is exporting the majority of its money, um, it probably it can't just do that forever.
Yeah.
um, and because I think that if you had that data, you can get data on there's some different, like, commerce data that you can get, but I don't think there's anything that really shows here's what our community is spending, and
Yeah.
here's where they're spending that. And I think
What?
that would be, man, that'd
Yeah.
be slick.
What'd be interesting is if you could, let's say like, look at spending, let's say by categories or something like that, right? And you could say, okay, our community is spending X amount of dollars on socks through Amazon. Of course, how would you ever? I have no. They wouldn't give you that data, but if you could
Yeah.
see, like you're saying, the movement of, and then you could say, oh, by the way, here's an X dollars opportunity for our community to sell socks or very specific water bottles, or like, and then you
Yep.
could kind of give the community like very actionable data around like businesses they could create, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be incredibly interesting if only Amazon would open source all of their data.
let's just, let's just put that out there and but another angle to that is like what if the community had like a browser extension where we tracked our own purchases and shared the data that way, right?
Oh, that would be incredible. That'd be pretty slick. Um, and I mean, you'd have to probably approximate it because sometimes you're going to order on your phone, and
Yeah,
the extension wouldn't
totally.
work there.
Yeah.
One thing that you can't necessarily see what is what's the order, but you could see how much is being spent if you had like a local bank. Um,
Hmm.
the transactions that go across the card, you could see
Right.
how much people are spending on it. You could get that level of granularity, but you couldn't get
Right.
into, okay, well, what did they buy?
Or what about like email access? Now that's you don't I mean not everybody's but the interesting thing about this whole localism approach, right, is like the idea of me giving email access to some random startup is like there's a high bar of trust. There's a really high bar of trust there. But the idea, if this is a local thing, it's like that bar is I don't know if you say the bar is lower, but there's a higher level of trust if we're saying, hey, as a community, we want to do this so that we can help all, so that we're helping our community, right? So like maybe you give access and then you
Yep.
scrape the email and get the order. Probably a lot easier actually to get Amazon level order data.
That
Um,
would be, yeah, if you said like, yeah, forward in your invoice or something
right,
or whatever, your
right.
receipts.
Right. That's even better. Just forward it in. That's a pretty good idea, actually. Yeah.
It is, I think, yeah, and if you can figure out the incentive for like why, then I think that'd be really slick. But it does
Yeah.
seem, yeah, man, and if you just had that information, if you just said, hey, like, send in receipts and maybe we'll figure out, um, um, yeah, if you could just figure out how to get all the receipts in and figure out how to anonymize it, right?
Right.
But to
Right.
be able to just and prove out that it's somebody that's in the community, um,
Right.
and come up with an incentive for doing so. For every receipt, we give you, whatever. Um,
Right. Right.
that would be really, really powerful.
And maybe like there's a incentive program with local businesses participate and give discounts or loyalty points, so like a community based loyalty program or something like that.
Yep.
Um, yeah. What what's your definition of localism? Like I've definitely heard of that concept. I mean, but how do you said you're a big believer in it. Like
Yeah. Well, so I think that where I kind of came across it, um, in following. Are you familiar with Joe Norman on Twitter?
not sure. I'll
Um,
have to pull them up. Yeah.
Normonics is his Twitter account, and he's a complexity scientist,
Okay.
um, and I think I came across him from Nassim Taleb,
Okay.
um, and just some of the impacts of like trying to understand complex systems and some of the things that we see right now in the world, um, how little, when we have these super complex systems that operate, that we kind of live in, um,
Yeah.
we can see that some of these things that we try to optimize or we view as, um, hey, this is better, like, a globalist approach. We've seen kind of like, okay, well, now we know what happens when we have these totally interconnected systems,
Yeah.
and so I kind of picked up on it from that and realizing that the complexity there and just everything that goes on there, there's just a lot more risk in those
Yeah.
systems. And when you actually would, if you were to look at things and try to actually make them more local, we can't really. Uh, when you do that, then there you can fix a lot of things, and you can remove
Hmm.
a lot of risk.
Hmm.
I think would probably be the best example of it. And so I look at that as in we've totally ditched most local stuff.
Right.
I think that there's sort of that mantra of, oh, buy local, but it's a little bit more like a charity sort of thing. It's like, oh, you should do it because
Right.
just like because it's
Right.
nice. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and and I would say, well, it looks to me like you should probably do it because um, you have less risk. Like our supply chains are all jacked right now because we have to get
Right.
things from
Right.
across the ocean
Right.
instead of the making things where we are here. We sort of like over optimized, and
Right.
it,
Right.
and it seems like maybe we're now we're on the business end of that, and so that's where I kind of look at localism as, hey, this is something that could potentially have a better impact. It's something that maybe that system was better
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. 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 Like it when it goes from like a nice cute thing to buy local to being more of like this is going to give our community real leverage and sort of when you talk about reducing risk, like what are some of the what are some of the risks if you were to flesh that out, like losing jobs and just like being on the wrong side of economics and things like that.
Well, yeah, I think the clearest example is sort of the supply chains right now,
Supply
where
chain,
we
supply
we
chain,
we
right?
have grocery
Totally.
store shelves that are empty in certain places,
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I even noticed I was at a pumpkin patch with my kids, and I'm like, there's all these boxes here, like you can grow pumpkin. I mean, I live in Kansas, I'm like, you can grow pumpkins here, but
Uh-huh.
yet like the pumpkin patch had some pumpkins there, but then they like had all these ones shipped in from it was like South America or something. I'm like, really? Like that? Why are we doing
let's
that? That doesn't make
let's
any
grow
sense.
some
Like,
pumpkins. Yeah.
and I'm like, you can grow them here, and it's crazy. Like that it's cheaper to do that there and have it shipped across the
It's
ocean
so
on a boat
crazy.
and on a truck
Yeah.
and brought. It's just so weird to think that that's where we've kind of got to. Oh, hey, well, that was the cheapest way to get it done.
Yeah.
Um, and it just seems like that the problem that we can see now is that, okay, well, in a pandemic now we have increased risk of people being sick, and then it has a
Right.
now they have to shut down a port, and then all the other
Right.
things that are
Right.
kind of going on where now people don't want to, hey, I don't really want to show up for a physical location. I want to work
Right.
from my computer at home.
Right.
And so
Right.
now they
Right.
can't
Right.
hire enough people to work the dock and to get everything
Yeah.
off of the boat.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And now the pumpkin patch is out of pumpkins.
Yeah.
And when we could have just grown them there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there, yeah,
Sometimes I'll watch videos on like vertical farming and stuff like that, like where you can particularly microgreens. I think pumpkins are maybe a little harder to and bigger foods are a little harder to grow in the
yeah,
but
you better have a big
they've
house.
you bet. Yeah. And like, there's these little things you can buy where, you can grow stuff easily in your house and as that stuff continues to progress, it's going to get real interesting. Singapore does some really interesting stuff there where like Singapore is just this massive city, city state and they have this thing where like you have to have green spaces in your buildings, so like on rooftops and things like that. And then I think they recently changed the law from you have to have general green spaces with trees and stuff like that to where you have to grow food in some of these areas. And it's yeah, it's like there's so much that can be done there. And then like with 3D printing, like I was thinking about this a lot with supply chain stuff. If we can get to 3D printing at scale, it's going to totally invert everything. Um,
Yep.
right? Because then
Oh,
you're designing stuff anywhere, you're printing it all locally. I mean, it would change everything.
yes. Yeah, it absolutely could, where any of your goods, then you could go back to getting them local again. You just create them yourself. And that's part of it, is I think just being able to kind of understand that even thinking through another example would be energy right now, where, oh,
Yeah.
hey, you're on the grid, and oh, well, now
Yep.
there's a problem here, and the prices are
Yep.
skyrocketing, um, and then during winter, then now you're sorry, we had to shut down, or it's too warm, and now we have to cut off the electricity, and I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way to do this, and it's probably not doing it at scale. It's probably breaking that down and figuring out how to do it um, in a more, I guess, local. Hey, I'm going to do it locally. I'm going to be self-reliant,
Yeah.
and then you just remove a lot of risk.
Yeah. 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 It's crazy how fast things are changing and how we're getting on the wrong side of a lot of these over optimizations that were made.
Yep.
The supply chain thing, are you following that in much depth, like the supply chain backlog that's going on right now?
A little bit, a little bit. I don't, I think just from the standpoint of pointing this out in discussions with my wife, and I'm like, see, this is why I wanted to buy that whole side of beef. Um, because I don't want us to go into the grocery store and realize, oh, hey, yeah, if you can buy it, then you're going to pay $50 a pound,
Yeah.
um, and then you got to figure out what you're going to do about that.
Yeah.
So I think just from that standpoint of, hey, another example of why we want to try to be a little more self-reliant and a little less um, reliant on these giant systems that
Yeah.
are too complex for their own good.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll every once in a while, like I've gone down some heavy YouTube rabbit holes where I'm watching videos on growing your own food, and there's whole diagrams on how if you have an acre, which we don't, we have a small piece of land, but if you have like an acre, you can grow all the food you need and things like that for a whole family, and of course we tried to grow some food in the backyard and then it all like died. Like we like tried to grow some basic stuff like some jalapenos and some blackberries and some peaches, and like everything just died on it. So I'm like, well, I guess that's not my thing. But
Yeah, I know that feeling. It's like I get really excited for the garden, and then the bugs move in, and I'm like, well, guess that's why we
like
go to the grocery store.
yeah, like we had this peach tree, and we're watching this thing grow, and like my kids are getting all excited about it, and months and months we're waiting. Finally, we're seeing the peaches are like almost ripe, and we're getting all excited. And then all of a sudden one day they're all just eaten up by birds or something. They're just gone. And it was like it was just the most disheartening thing. But yeah, as they can like productize stuff like those little containers, we just plug them in and they have the lighting baked in and the hydroponics and stuff like that. Um, as those get better and better, like that's going to be pretty cool.
Totally. Yep, I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah. But I think a lot of those, like, it's funny how if we're used to web-based stuff, you think to yourself like, oh, like you can grow food, so just like just drag and drop the thing to grow a larger piece of food. And then you realize like, no, like in the physical world, there's different constraints where like and same with manufacturing. It's like, yeah, you can 3D print really small basic plastic parts, but as things get more complicated, like good luck with that,
Yep.
like good luck doing that at scale. Um, but anyways, so yeah, this is all interesting stuff. What what else do you got? You said you have a startup you're working on. Is it what does your startup do?
Yeah. So my startup's in customer retention for
Oh,
subscription
cool.
businesses. So
Oh,
we
cool.
apply a form of machine learning known as reinforcement learning
Uh,
towards when you go cancel subscriptions. It tries
uh,
to interpret what's going wrong and if there is a solution um,
yeah,
for the problem, to try to overcome it. Because a lot of times when people move to cancel, um, there are maybe other things that could be done that would be better, but you got to do it really fast, or then it's sort of an annoying process as a customer. Um, and
Right.
so it's sort of it's called a cancel flow, is sort of like the new name that's come up for these sorts of things.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
and that's what we provide a tool that does that.
Oh, that's cool, man. Like what stage are you at with the startup? You have some customers and stuff or?
Yeah. So we've had it. The like sort of our core product has been out for about 2 years. We've got close to 500 customers, um,
Nice, man.
and mostly subscription direct to consumer, and subscription SaaS as well.
Okay, cool. What are what did you build? And I don't know if you can share all this, but
Yeah.
like what did you build the reinforcement learning thing on logic on top of? Are you using like a TensorFlow or some kind of a like AI package or something?
Well, yeah. So originally we used some scikit-learn, and then we have used TensorFlow. We ended up just rewriting our own, and just it, wanted it to be a little more flexible. Um,
Okay.
and part of the machine learning elements that we have are actually, we open sourced it here about a month and a half ago.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah. So it's if you ever want to look it up, it's decision underscore engine on. You can just search for it, and it should show up. It's just a Python package.
Oh, cool. Okay. And what are some of the I actually used to work for like a loyalty software for e-commerce and then I built like an email marketing software that did like retention email type stuff
Oh,
for
nice,
e-commerce. Yeah, like abandoned cart and different stuff like that. And
awesome.
what are some of the things that you hook into for trying to reduce cancellations and stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, our integration, we integrate with Shopify, we integrate with Stripe, um,
Right.
Chargebee, a bunch of the subscription billing tools, um, and then we'll connect in. There's all sort of, there's all kinds of data points on each customer where you can identify how long that customer's been around, how much they've spent, um, location, some of these things, as well
Yeah.
as asking sort of like our cancel flow asks, okay, well, what's going wrong, and it tries to
Yeah.
take in that data with all the other data points in order to come up with, like, hey, here, let's try to come up with a solution to this.
Hmm. Oh, that's cool. And do you have like metrics on how much you're able to improve over like baseline cancellation rates and stuff?
Yeah. So it's pretty significant. On average, it's 34%. So
Oh, nice.
34% of the customers that go through it. And then we also found that, if we're able to save those customers, or I guess of the customers that are saved, it'll actually increase the lifetime value of that customer by an average of about 31%. So it's essentially like another third of the customer lifetime value that's gone if you don't save those customers. Um, and then
Nice, man.
we've seen the save rate as high as 70% for a couple of our customers.
Nice, dude.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Any
meaningful.
like
It ends up being pretty meaningful.
yeah, that's really cool, man. Any particularly interesting like ways that you prevent cancellation or kind of surprising scenarios that help to reduce cancellation?
Yeah, the more that you can kind of personalize it and pull in data on, you know, sort of acknowledging and trying to show appreciation um, for your customer, to kind of say like, hey, you've been with us for 3 months, and we appreciate your business. We want to try to figure out something to address the problem, and here,
Hmm.
and then coming up with like an offer that can
Hmm.
either be just reminding them of what's coming soon. It can be, hey, we'll have somebody jump on this and try to help you solve a problem, or it can be a
Hmm.
discount. And then on the discount side, it's interesting that we found that irregular number discounts work better than general, like, sort of round numbers, which was an interesting
Okay,
one.
that makes sense.
Like
Yeah,
a 17% discount was more effective than a 20% discount. Um,
that's weird.
yeah, we didn't actually know why. It wasn't something we came up with. In fact, when we first saw it, we were like, "Oh, why are they doing that? That seems like a bad idea."
The customer just
And
came up with that idea.
yeah, they came up with it, and we just saw their save rate was really good, and we're like, "Huh, we should try to figure this out." And we told a couple others to try it, and got the data up, as far as how many people were using it, and went through and we're like, yeah, all right, this is interesting. Um,
That's cool.
and it's significant. And so we did sort of identify why. So we ended up talking to a few on like the end consumer to find out what was it about this that stood out, or
Hmm.
why did you accept this? And there were sort of two reasons that we learned. The one was that they just like, oh, it kind of caught my attention. Um,
Totally. Yeah.
like, oh, that was kind of weird. It just sort of out
Uh,
of the ordinary.
like
And then the other one,
pattern. It's a pattern. What's it called when you break somebody's pattern? You know.
yeah, yeah. So I think
Yeah.
that it was that, and then the next one was that they thought it was personal. So they thought it was like personalized to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that does make sense. So now we're actually rolling that out as a, hey, we'll personalize the price.
Got
Um,
it.
that way you don't necessarily have to.
Right. Fast forward 5 years, we're all going to be used to these random percentage discounts that we see all over the place.
Yep,
It's like, because like these days, it's like you always see the 10%, you always see the 20, like there's these standard round percentage discounts that you just, if it's an email pop up or whatever it is that you're just used to, you
yep,
know?
yep. And you
Yeah.
kind of have to spend a little bit more time because when you do like 10%, you can do the math really easy in your head. It's like, oh, well, that's going to end up being this. Maybe I'm not
Ah,
interested. Or
yeah.
20,
Right.
you know, 17. I don't know. There's a lot of people that are going to do that math in their head. So you think, well, what would that be? And you're
Yeah.
kind of, at
Yeah.
that point you're acknowledging and you're giving it a shot. You're thinking through whether or not it works
You're
for you.
right. You're using more brain cycles on it, and then
Yep.
you're like considering it more. That's cool.
Yep.
Nice, man. Well, this was a really fun chat. Thanks again for taking some time. It's really neat to chat through some of this stuff. I love what you built with the city dashboard, and I'll um, try to get something going. I got to figure out like how to easily grab some of this data, in case like I'm not going to write out a whole PDF parsing library, but
Yep.
like if there was a relatively easy way to get some of this stuff going, I definitely would throw something up, like on Airtable or something like that, and then try to get it rolling.
Yeah, that would be. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's sort of interesting data points that are kind of easy. I mean, I think if you figure out how to talk to, the crime one's something that everybody talks about, but I don't know that anybody. I don't know that there's any like great location to go look at it. There's some
Yeah,
websites that have stuff out there, but I'm always like a little suspect because I'm thinking, okay, well, wonder where did they get their data from? But I think
yeah,
that would be one that if you can get it, and technically it's supposed to be, it's public record stuff, so you should be able to get that information. It's just a matter of like, oh, are you
yeah,
gonna have to scrape a bunch of PDFs?
yeah, yeah. The crime thing is interesting because like I remember when we first moved here, I was looking up a bunch of crime data and I was there's different sites with maps that show you, and you're trying to buy, figuring out where you want to buy a house and you want to get in a good area. And you can get real paranoid when you start looking at crime data. At least I found that I would, and it put me into this paranoid state of mind. And at some point, I was just like, I'm going to stop thinking about this. And
Yep.
it's just a tricky. But I think that's one of the good things about looking at trends is like if you're looking at points on a map and you're like going, oh man, I want to get away from that point on the map where a burglary happened.
Yep.
It can put you into this paranoid state of mind versus like, okay, here's our crime rate. Is it going up or down? Like, let's get it. What can we do to get it going down? Kind of a thing.
Yep.
Like, yeah. Um, so yeah, to be continued on that. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
um,
yeah. Well, and if I see any other data points, then I'll be sure to send them over your way because it would be. I do love the idea, and I think the more communities that do this, then it'll end up having a positive impact.
nice, man. Well, thanks again. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up, or any links you want to share, anything like that?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I mean, I think if anybody has any ideas, I'm always open for it, and if there's anything I can do to kind of provide information about the way that some of the data that we've found and things we've found that worked, then you know find me on Twitter. It's just MATMOODY.